amending your garden beds in fall really doesn't need a lot of effort and time. I try to keep it as simple as possible. Hi, I'm Gardener Scott, a master gardener who discusses everything gardening so that you can become a better gardener. Join me today as I show you some easy ways I amend my garden beds using some no-till methods. I have many different varieties of garlic planted in this bed. In a few weeks before I put the cloves in place, I amended this soil using an incredibly easy method. The basic idea behind soil amending is just to add organic material to the soil. The organic material becomes food for all the soil organisms, and they'll break it down into nutrients that the plants can use and grow nice and green and give you a great harvest. Over a period of time, the plants can deplete some of the nutrients in the soil. So by adding more organic material, you're providing more food for those soil organisms and more nutrients for your plants. To keep the soil amending easy, I like to use organic materials that I already have on hand. These are some grow bags that I used for different plants over the course of the season. I have a couple different options now. I can take these bags that are filled with soil, pick them up, store them away for the winter, and reuse them next year. The soil is still adequate for at least one more season of growing. Or, to make storage a little easier, I can take the organic matter that's in this soil and add it to other beds to help replenish some of that organic material. The soil that I built for these grow bags is primarily compost and peat moss. Great material that's often used to amend beds. So what I like to do, instead of storing all of these full, is to go ahead and empty this great soil that has all that organic material in it into some of my other beds. And that's the primary way that I amended this bed with the garlic growing in it. Now, I started with some fresh green grass clippings. And if you make compost, you probably know that fresh cut green grass has a really nice nitrogen component to it. So by adding a layer of the green grass, I'm adding some nitrogen to jumpstart the decomposition. And then on top of that, I just went ahead and poured a couple of my grow bags, covering this entire space. And that was it. It was just a layer of grass on top of some of the dead material from a freeze, and then the soil from the grow bag. And that's what I planted my garlic in. If you have dead plants in the bed that you're seeking to amend, you don't need to clean up the bed. Go ahead and leave those dead plants in place. They may have already dropped their leaves, they might have some stems. You can break apart some of the material, but you don't have to remove it. I like to use a method commonly called chop and drop, where I'll cut the plant off at the surface, and then you allow it to just drop and become organic material on top of the soil. I'll take it a step further for what I call cut and drop, where I'll take some of these bigger pieces and cut them into smaller pieces that I allow to spread across the surface. And then what I'll do is add some more organic material on top of all of this. There's a lot of organic material already in this bed. Not only the dead plants, but the mulch I was using during the growing season. And you guessed it, on top of this, I'll add some grow bag soil because I don't need to remove any of this organic material. It'll start decomposing right away, and in the spring, along with this compost and peat on top, I'll have some really good soil to start growing in. I don't like to keep any soil uncovered going into the winter, so I always add mulch after I amend my beds. And I like to use straw. The straw will help retain some of the soil moisture through the rest of the fall, the winter, and early spring to really aid some of that bacterial growth that will decompose a lot of this organic material, in addition to helping out other soil organisms. And by using a mulch, a light mulch like this, like straw, it also adds an organic component because it too will break down. Come springtime, I'll definitely need to add more mulch because a lot of this straw will have already started to decompose as well. You can get an indication of just how quickly straw can decompose when you look at the straw bales that I actually grew some plants in over the course of the summer. This one in particular has already decomposed in just one season to about half of its original size, and these others are also already decomposing as well. Instead of using fresh straw, I'll go ahead and break down these used straw bales as not only organic material, but a mulch for the other half of that bed I was just working in. This method of just using organic material and covering it with compost or compost and peat is basically a simple sheet composting idea, just like lasagna gardening. And this is my lasagna garden bed you might have seen in another video. I'll also use some of the grow bag material on top of this going into the winter. Now, if you don't have grow bags and you don't have that pre-mixed soil like I do, it's no problem. You just need to think about putting some of the plants and other green material on top of the soil at the end of the season and then covering it with basic compost. I'm going to clean up this bed so that I can amend it. Now I'll go ahead and harvest some of these plants, like the turnips. They'll taste great after being exposed to a freeze. But as for the leaves and all the green tops of all of these plants, I'll go ahead and leave them behind using the chop and drop or cut and drop method. All of this organic material will really help to improve the soil in this bed. I harvested all these fall garden crops of beets and turnips and just left all of the leaves, all the tops on the surface, and then spread them around. Now, I did have some kale in this bed and it was getting pretty thick and pretty hard. So I pulled that kale out of the ground just because those stems would take a very long time to decompose, and I'll throw them in my compost pile. But the rest of this is all nice, soft, leafy material. And it's placed on top of the mulch that I had in this bed, which is straw. I like mulching with straw because it breaks down, especially underneath a lot of this fresh green material. And now I'll go ahead and just add compost to the top. And this is something that you could do very easy. You don't have to make all of your compost. That is preferred. But if you don't have a compost pile, it's okay to buy bags and add it to the top of your beds. I like to have at least 2 inches of compost on top of this fresh organic material. So in a 4-foot by 8-foot bed like this, that means I need a little more than 5 cubic feet of compost as a minimum to give me that depth. And next, you guessed it, I'll cover it with my favorite mulch, a layer of straw, and it's ready to go into the winter. Come spring, all of this soft material should be decomposed, or at least mostly decomposed and ready for me to plant. Now, I said I pulled the kale plants. I also pull a lot of other really thick-stemmed plants. So the plants like tomatoes, for instance. Most of the time, I'll pull them out of the ground before I amend like this, just because their root system can be quite large and their stems can be quite large. And at least in my environment, they take a long time to break down in the soil. They'll break down much quicker in the compost pile. If you benefited from this video and you haven't done so, consider subscribing to the Gardener Scott channel. And to continue your journey to become a better gardener, well, click on one of these videos next. I'm Gardener Scott. Enjoy gardening.